Well, as Kate told you, my name's Connie, and I am a Jesus freak. It just is that way. Thank you. I'm glad that someone's happy about that. It just is the way it is. I want to tell you about a plane ride I took last fall. I got onto the plane, and there weren't a lot of people on this plane, so, we all feel happy when that happens, because you can sit some way other than this. And the person on the other side of the aisle, so I had 2 seats to myself, and the person on the other side of the aisle had 2 seats to himself. We were both sitting in the window seats, and I looked at the seat next to him, and he had a tablet of paper with the longest handwritten math equation that you have ever seen. I felt like I was on the Big Bang Theory. I couldn't believe that there in my pew, or in my row of the plane, was somebody who was so brilliant. I had to be on the wrong plane, I just didn't belong on this plane. I kept looking at the guy because, I don't know, I just wasn't used to being around this kind of genius. I'm Lutheran. And so I kept looking at him and looking at this equation, and every now and then he'd pick it up and he would add more and more to it. And as he added more to it, I just got uncomfortable. It doesn't really make any sense. I know that people are different. I know that in this world that there are mathematicians, and there are poets, and there are musicians, and there are engineers, and there are doctors, and there are nurses. And by the way, if you need brain surgery, don't call me. Call a physician, call a surgeon. I know that God has made us all to be different, but having that kind of genius so close to me just made me a little uncomfortable. I've never seen anybody besides like Sheldon and Leonard write out that kind of math. Finally, I was able to just put it out of my mind, and the plane ride went on, and somewhere in the flight, I picked up my Bible, which is how I usually spend time when I'm flying, and I noticed that the same guy, he kept looking at me like he was uncomfortable. More proof that we're people who speak different languages. We're just different sorts of people. In my years of doing ministry, I'm often asked the same question, but it takes different forms. People say to me, I wish my husband would come to church. Or they say, how can I talk to my neighbor about my faith? Or they say, my grandchild isn't baptized and that really bothers me. Or they say, what can I do to get my children involved? Or something like that. Have you ever heard that kind of phrase? I've served in several different congregations, and that question keeps coming back. One time I talked with a friend, and I said, I'm really passionate about doing mission development kind of ministry, because statistics say 1 in 3 homes have a meaningful church connection. And so that means that 2 in 3 homes don't. And my friend laughed in my face and he said, you've got to be kidding me. You're the only person I know who goes to church. You're the only person I know who goes to church. I thought 1 in 3 was bad. So these questions that people ask, how can my spouse go to church? My grandchild isn't baptized. How can I talk to my coworkers about my faith? They're good questions. They're actually really great questions, because at the heart of them, they indicate that the people who ask them have a deep hope, a deep faith, something that really makes a difference in their lives. You don't want to share something you don't care about. If you go to a lousy restaurant, you don't want people you love to go there. You only want to share something that you care about. We hold our faith dearly, and that's why we want to share it. And so they're good questions, and they shouldn't be so hard, because they are good questions. We're not embarrassed to recommend the new steak that they're offering at Chili's. We're not embarrassed to invite somebody to a ball game. But somehow we don't have the language to invite someone to share our faith. So I want to talk with you a little bit about sharing faith today. And I want to try to demystify it some. And I want to reset my timer on my phone so I can keep track of that. You know, when we talk to our neighbors and our friends about faith, they might look at us like they have just no idea what we're talking about. And it can be hard for us, because we do love our faith and we do love our peeps, right? And we don't know how to bring them together. Remember how I looked at that guy on the plane doing the math? But sometimes when we talk about our faith, like that guy looked at me with my Bible, people look at us like, you know, we're on a spaceship. Or we're like a T-Rex in the middle of the neighborhood. And we just don't have any connection with real life. But before I go too much forward, I want to go backward and talk a little bit about how I think we can make that difference for people, how we can really engage them. There's that scripture passage from Romans that I think is so beautiful. How then can they call on one whom they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. Romans 10:14 and 15. Now your feet have brought you here today. Your faith has brought you here today. Maybe you're a leader in your church, maybe you're curious, or maybe you're just in the wrong conference room. But let's make the most of it. Has it always been this way, that you would come to an event about church leadership? About sharing ideas of faith, about being together in mission? Maybe it has. Maybe this has always been a passion for you. And if so, that's fantastic, and you're one of the lucky ones. Most of us haven't been this way. I haven't always been a Jesus freak. And I'm going to make another assumption. I'm guessing the people in your life, or the people who you're asked about, who don't go to church or who don't talk about faith, they haven't had the experience of faith being a relevant thing either. Most of us, even if we did go to church and sing songs and pray prayers and work the flannel board, we may not have known much about God's love or God's grace or forgiveness or relationship until people came along and showed it to us. So I want to tell you two different stories. Two stories, and I happen to know them well because they're my own stories. One of them happened because of the people, the youth group at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Falls Church, Virginia. Hi, Alfie. I'm a daughter of that congregation. I went through confirmation. My parents made me. And after that, I didn't have to go to church anymore. Easy. My parents left the choice up to me. Bad call for any parent. But anyway, they left the choice up to me, and so that was easy. Well, I'm going to stay home. Why would I go? Because I didn't think I'd fit in. I didn't have much self-esteem, and so why would the kids around me believe in me either? But then one Sunday night, there was a knock at my door, and it was half the youth group, and Pastor Steve Swanger standing at my door. And they said, Connie, we're having a party at church and it wouldn't be the same without you. And I thought to myself, what? And I turned around and I looked at my mom, and it turned out this whole thing had been prearranged. And so sure enough, I got packed in the back of the Datsun or whatever that car was, and we went to church that night, and it wasn't a worship service, it was a party. And there we were, and we had fun. And I never missed another Sunday night at youth group again. And before you knew it, I started showing up Sunday mornings. And then I became the president of the youth group. And then I went to Capital University, a Lutheran college. My second year in college was a really, really tumultuous year in my life. Lots of tragedy in my life and in my family, and I don't have time to go into that today. But a cousin had died in a car accident, and there was a lot of tragedy around it, and I decided I was just done with God. And lucky for me, God wasn't done with me yet. But I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. And I had two friends who they were Christian friends, not in that icky kind of way. I think you know what I mean. But they just would sit with me and they would talk with me. And I told them I didn't want to have anything to do with God anymore. And they said to me, it's okay to be mad at God. Everyone does it. Now, I didn't know what they would say to me when I finally had the courage to tell them that I was mad at God. But I figured they'd probably say something about Jesus or the 10 Commandments or sin. But they said it was okay and that everyone does it. And so those two stories were my resurrection stories. Here I was a teenager who thought I would never fit in. And people from church came to my door. And they said, we're having a party, and it wouldn't be the same without you. And then I had college friends who said to me, it's okay to be mad at God. Everyone does it. And it was like those friends participated in rolling a stone away from a self-imposed tomb and showing me the light of God's glory. Language is what matters. Language is how we share our faith, and relationship is what matters. When someone comes into a worship service for the first time, or getting your husband or your neighbor or your spouse to come to church, that's just a little bit of it. That's just a very little bit. And relationship is what really matters. That's what makes the difference. Being able to speak a language where you can relate to somebody. If you think about people who are outside the church, they're not going to know the language that we use. They're not going to know what Kyrie is. They're not going to know why we stand up and why we sit down. They're not going to know about Old Testament and New Testament. They're not going to know what resurrection means. We've got to be able to talk to them about these things in everyday life. Resurrection, when I couldn't see anymore, and then suddenly I felt like there was color in the world. It takes time. And being in the front row seat of people's lives is the way that we can be part of their resurrection stories, the way that we can bring color to their lives, or at least the way that we can be there when God brings color to their lives again. So see, I think we need to be bilingual when we want to share our faith with people. We need to take the words of faith and put them into words that people can understand. We're having a party and it won't be the same without you. And it's okay to be mad at God. everybody doesn't. Those are really, really awesome words. You know, it's not only the people outside the church don't understand the word Kyrie, but it goes deeper. They have other questions too. Like, why doesn't God do something about world hunger? Or what about my uncle who has cancer? Or what about my dog who's going to die? Or about my brother who has PTSD ever since he came back from Afghanistan, and he's back now, but I wonder if he's ever really going to come back. I mean, those are the questions they have. And we can help relationship them out of those questions. So I only have a couple minutes left, and I want to give you a couple of ideas about some concrete things that your churches might be able to do to draw people into relationship with people who were there. One is to do community drives for things, like a community coat drive. Have people just drive by and drop off coats to give to people who are cold. People are so into wanting to serve their community. They don't know if they want to come to church, but they're so into wanting to serve your community. If they know that your church cares about the community, you've got an in. Another idea, we're going to try this spring and summer at our church. We're going to go out. We have a few photographers in the congregation. We're going to take random pictures of people in the community, and we're going to ask them if we can take their picture and ask them for prayer concerns they might have, and ask them if we can post their picture in our church with their prayer concern. And then each quarter, invite those people to a banquet and ask them how it's going and help them get to know one another. We're calling it the 100 Neighbors Project, and we're going to hope to get 100 pictures of our neighbors up on the wall. Just a way to remind our congregation that we exist for our neighbors. There's a congregation in our synod who's doing theology and hymns. They hang out at a pub, and they drink beer, and they sing hymns. It's a way to get out in the community. So all these great ways that you can be creative and reach out to your people. Speak their language before you ask them to speak yours. Thank you.